How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. Start with a little bit of a review from last week, after grading the film and talking with the coaches, and then kind of making the corrections on Sunday. So first thing is offensive players of the week. We gave to the offensive line. Specifically, if you had to single one guy out, I'd probably say Brendan Mann played really well, played really physical, but we gave to the whole line, 569 yards of total offense. Very balanced attack, 322 passing yards, 247 rushing yards, and then obviously the stat is 0 sacks in I think 32 attempts, so very impressed there. Defensively, Ryan Buchholz, 4 tackles, 1.5 tackles for a loss, 1 forced fumble, and a sack. Thought he played really well, creates a lot of flexibility for us on the defense, specifically the defensive line. Then obviously on special teams, DeAndre Tompkins, school record average per game, 61-yard punt return for a touchdown, first since 2008. Great to get Derek Williams out of the record book there. And then averaged 31.8 yards on 4 returns. In general, I was very pleased with our execution and our effort overall, just as an organization. I still think we got a little bit more in the tank. I mean, obviously, you look at DeAndre Tompkins and his punt return, and he gets the credit. But if you watch the punt return for a touchdown, there's a lot of guys that blocked extremely well to set that up. Cam Brown really sticks out in my mind. Z-Mac is another guy that kind of sticks out in my mind, and really all of them. Everybody was out there working really hard to allow our team and DeAndre to be successful. So I was pleased with that. We played over 60 players. Very, very pleased with that. Got a lot of experience, kept guys fresh, kept guys healthy. Offensively, we had 15 explosive plays. Big emphasis on our team is creating explosive plays, gave up 0 sacks. We were 5 of 6 in the red zone. Obviously, we had 1 turnover in the red zone. We want to eliminate that. We got to improve on 3rd down. It's still an area that we need to get better. We were 33% on 3rd down. On 4th down, we were 50%. Defensively, good collective effort. Played a lot of guys. Only yielded 159 total yards, 0 points, 14 tackles for a loss, and then only gave up 1 explosive, which came late at the game. So, whenever you win the turnover battle, we didn't win the turnover battle, we tied that, but then whenever you also win the explosive play battle, you got a chance, to have a lot of success, especially when you're talking about, 15 explosive plays to 1. We got to create more turnovers on defense, and then we got to finish tackles. We had a lot of guys that had positions for really good tackles for a loss or minimum gain tackles, and kind of slipped through our fingers. So we got to be more consistent. We got to finish our tackles. And then special teams, again, overall, I thought it was really good, but I'd also make the argument on some of those other punt returns, our effort wasn't as good as it was on the touchdown. So just in general, pleased with kind of where we're at. Looking at Pittsburgh, Coach Narduzzi obviously does a really good job. Got a lot of respect for him and their program. Very challenging offense. Probably more similar to a Stanford, Michigan State style of offense. Multiple personnel groups, multiple formations, unbalanced shifts, motions, trades. I think that's something that we're going to spend a lot of time working on this week. Defensively, base 4-3 defense. They use a lot of nickel. Then obviously they'll go down. They'll go with their 3 down front as well. Very well coached, play hard, physical, run to the ball. And then special teams, I think, is the area they do probably their best job. I think their special teams coordinator does a tremendous job. Quadri Henderson, in my opinion, is the issue in the game. He's the guy you go into the game and you say, who's the guy that can be a game changer or a game wrecker, however you want to describe it. He's that guy. So we have to have a plan for him to try to limit the impact that he'll have in this game. And then the other thing is, I saw some things kind of reported, which just kind of interesting. I listen to everything and I read everything. not that it matters a whole lot, but last year we went to their place and it was a tough environment. Obviously it's an exciting game for the state. We were the underdogs, everything that I saw, and now this year coming to our place, obviously I think the environment's going to be great as well. So, it should be exciting. I know our guys are looking forward to it. And then the last thing I'll say before I'll be quiet and let you guys ask questions is, I want to make sure people understand, what I'm saying. People kind of keep asking me about this game, and guys, I understand the significance of this game and I understand the importance of this game, but I'm also a huge believer that this is the most important game on our schedule because it's the one this week. Last week, the Akron game was the most important game in the universe for us. This week, the Pitt game is the most important game in the universe. It's the only thing that exists for us. So I don't want people to take what I'm saying the wrong way. This is the Super Bowl for us because it's the game that we play Saturday. Last week, our Super Bowl was Akron. So, I think when I say these things, people act like I'm trying to say that the Pitt game is not a big game. It's a huge game. It is the most important game that we have on our schedule. Last week, that was the most important game that we had on our schedule. Next week, we'll talk about next week. But that's just how we're going to approach it. Always have, always will. It's not going to change. As much as people want to tell me how we should be approaching it, that's how we will always approach it. It is a very, very important game for us because it's the one we play Saturday.
Start with Rich Scarcella from the Reading Eagle.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Rich. How come you don't come and see us anymore? The rain?
Because it's a 5-hour ride back and forth.
That's a fair point. It's a fair point. But I miss you.
James, anyway, you mentioned...
No, not anyway. I miss you.
Is it much different than it was a year ago with the different offensive coordinator and different personnel in the backfield?
No, because I think Pat's running a program where he has systems that he believes in, and he's going to hire coordinators to come in and run those systems. So although it's a different guy doing it, he went out and hired a guy with a similar philosophy as his. Obviously there's some tweaks, but when you watch the first two, maybe the first 3 drives against Youngstown, it looks like the same stuff that they ran last year. Trades, shifts, motions, unbalanced, fly sweep, fake fly sweep, inside zone, power, split zone, those types of things. So, I think it's very similar. It's very similar.
Bob Flounders, Harrisburg Patriot News.
Hi, James. How are you?
Good, Bob. How are you?
I'm good. James, I wanted to follow up on your comments about Ryan Buchholz. Sharice Miller obviously went out of the game early against Akron. Ryan looked very disruptive when he was in there. Just your thoughts on his development and kind of what his versatility and his athleticism means to the defense. I think he's also a guy that can help you at tackle in a pinch as well. What have you seen from him and kind of what you think maybe his ceiling is?
Well, he's a guy that we've been really kind of excited about, from the beginning, through the recruiting process. Once he arrived on campus, he's very mature, he's very intelligent, he's a massive human being in every area. I mean, he's 6'6", 275 pounds, carries it really well. He's a very, very good athlete, a fluid athlete, flexible, he can change direction. He's a guy that can do a lot of things for you. So he can kind of overpower people at defensive end, but he's not a guy that is just a power guy. He can counter move. He can flip his hips. Really he's got the athleticism of the defensive end, but also has the size to move inside if we need to, whether that's our wild package on 3rd down where we try to get 4 DNs on the field at the same time to create a little bit more of a pass rush and obvious passing situations. Whatever it may be, but we like the maturity, the versatility that he gives us, specifically at defensive end, but also creates some flexibility as well.
Derek LeVar, Wilkes-Barre Times leader.
Hi, James. Good afternoon.
Hi, Derek.
James, since the spring, how do you think Connor McGovern has handled the transition back to center, particularly the vocal aspect of it, his role as communicator?
I think he's been good. I don't know if I would necessarily call it a transition back. I know he played center in high school, but they pretty much ran goal line offense. If you go back and watch his tape, they ran goal line offense the entire game. He was in almost a 4-point stance with the quarterback under center, fullback like 2 yards behind the quarterback. So obviously, going back to center, and now all he does, or predominantly is shotgun snaps the whole time, and running a spread type system. It's new. Obviously, being in the middle and making the calls and kind of being the captain of the O-line, I get that part of it, but I don't know how much carryover there is from what he did in high school to what we're asking him to do. But he's a guy, as you guys know, played at a pretty high levels, a true freshman for us last year. He's gotten bigger, has gotten stronger, has gotten leaner. Is really doing a good job. Being verbal. That was an area I was a little bit concerned about him. Is he's not the most vocal guy. So making sure that he was going to take control in there, make the calls with confidence. That was something that I think needed to grow, and I think that was communicated through Coach Limegrover and myself, and he's done a good job. So I think you'll just continue to see him get better and better as the season goes on and gain more confidence, which will allow him to be more physical. So as much as we love Brian Gaia, Brian Gaia did a great job for us from a leadership, from an intelligence and a maturity standpoint, really from an athleticism perspective. But also Brian was 282 pounds, and McGovern is about 312 pounds. So it just creates a little bit different dynamic when you got McGovern next to Steven Gonzalez, who's, depending on the week, a cheeseburger, away from 360. So it just creates a different dynamic inside.
Mark Wilgenrich, Allentown Morning Call.
Hi, James. How are you today?
Good, Mark. We miss you too.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Maybe not after I ask the question, but we'll see. James, why did you decide to have Saquon Barkley return the opening kickoff of the second half Saturday, and then what is Miles Sanders' role going to be there?
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, we had it scheduled that he was going to return, the first kick of the game. That's what we had decided to do. We didn't get first kick of the game until the second half. I know everybody keeps talking about they felt like the game was in hand. Well, if anybody watched college football this weekend, I don't know if you necessarily could say that. So I'm very comfortable with that, and we'll continue to do that. Obviously, Miles is going to get opportunities at running back, and we'll also get opportunities as a kickoff return guy as well.
Frank Bonanni, York Daily Record.
Hey James, how's it going for you?
Good, Frank. How are you?
Good, real good, thanks. Your kickoff, I know Tyler's doing it for the first time regularly. I think Alex might have got a shot late. What did you think about their efforts? Are you going to switch them back and forth at all as we go forward? Not sure.
Right now, Tyler's the guy. We want to treat Alex very similar to other positions. When we feel like we can get him a rep and gain some experience, we'll try to do that. But it's Tyler's job. I thought Tyler did a great job with his ball location. I mean, you talk about we'd like for that ball to land 3-4 yards deep in the end zone and outside the numbers. And he didn't consistently get it 3-4 yards deep in the end zone, but his hang time was really good, and his location was really good in terms of outside the numbers. So, I think in the past we've kicked the ball into the end zone probably a little bit more consistently, but we also didn't have hang time. So, if that ball would ever be brought out without the hang time, could create some stress and challenges on our coverage team. So, I like where we're at. I'd like to see a little bit more pop. I'd like to see a little bit more distance. But I also have a lot of confidence in our coverage team right now and how they're playing. So I think we're in a good place. We'd like to get Alex a little bit of experience, and maybe as Alex gains experience, then he can take a little bit off of Tyler's plate, maybe every other, kick on kickoff type of deal, but, we'll just see how that plays out. Right now, Tyler is the guy, and, we'll just play it day by day.
Joe Giuliano, Philadelphia Inquirer.
Hi, James. How you doing?
Good, Joe. How are you?
Fine, thank you. My question's about Jason Cabinda. We all see how great a player he is on the field, but I'd just like to know from you what kind of a guy he is off the field, his leadership, and just what kind of a person is he?
Jason's been a guy very early. Very early on, from getting the job, getting to know Jason, getting to know Jason's mom. Jason's got a really strong mom. It's done a great job raising him. Comes from a very proud family. Family that takes education very serious. Jason's a guy that has very strong opinions and beliefs, which I like. That's also why he's such a strong leader, because when he says things, he says it with conviction because he's thought it through. He's going to be getting a degree in economics. He should be finishing this semester. Has done a nice job there, as well as is in leadership positions on campus as well. Take athletics and take school out of it, and just other experiences on campus. He's been great. He's a guy that you go in meetings, he is locked in. He's an active listener. He's an active learner. He's on the edge of his seat. He's nodding his head. He's got great eye contact. And he's the guy that you feel really strong that is going and reinforcing in the locker room and Saturday night, what the young guys should be doing as well. So I'm pleased with him. He's kind of what you want at the Mike linebacker. I will tell you, we talk a lot about leaving a legacy, here at Penn State, leaving a legacy on the football team, leaving a legacy in your community or from your high school or whatever it is. And I think Mike Hull is a great example. He did that with Jason. Jason talks all the time about Mike and how he practiced and how he was in meetings and how he was academically and how he played the game and how productive he was, and how every single day at practice for Mike it was the Super Bowl. He approached it like that every single day. It was funny because I remember when the NFL scouts came talking about it, and they kept saying, well, he's not this and he's not that. I'm like, I'm just telling you, this guy's going to be a player for you. So obviously, he's doing it again, at the next level. And I think, he left an impact to Jason. And I think, Jason is going to end up leaving an impact, with the young guys that we got in our program now, leaving a legacy that guys say, well, this is how Jason did it when he was here. So, I'm very pleased with him. It's the last cherry on top is making sure that he leaves in December with his degree in economics.
Mike Gross, Lancaster Newspapers.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Mike. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. How you doing?
Good.
With Andrew Nelson eventually working him back into the lineup, I imagine if he was a defensive lineman, it would be simple, just move it back into the rotation and go. It's a little different, I think, with offensive linemen. So talk a little bit about what are the challenges of kind of working him back in once he's ready to play.
Yeah, I think you're right. Where I probably would say it's more similar because he's such a veteran player and he's such an older player, and we got a veteran offensive line. So the fact that he's been able to work in and get reps in practice, and we've been able to kind of rotate him and Chaz, I actually think in a lot of ways it is like a defensive line mentality in terms of how we'd be able to rotate them, because they're, he's played so many games, for us. He's played so many games with a lot of those guys on the line already. So there is a chemistry built with him. I agree with you. You wouldn't rotate a second team offensive line like you do on the D line because of the chemistry. But I do think Andrew, Andrew doesn't limit you that way, and we do plan on continuing to work him back in. As soon as he and we and everybody feels like he is ready in every aspect. We think he's a very, very high level player. We think he's got a bright future and continue playing the game after Penn State. but we want to make sure that he is ready, before we put him back in.
Donnie Collins, Scranton Times Tribune.
Hi, James. How are you?
Good, Donnie. How are you?
Doing well. The blocking downfield with the receivers in the first game was really noticeable. Is that an area where you think these guys have gotten better over the years? And how do you kind of sell that to the young kids? Is it kind of something you were talking about earlier with kind of passing down the position? But is that something that they have to kind of buy into to play?
Well, I think a couple things. Number one, we emphasize it. Number two, we got big wideouts. If you recruit a bunch of really small, quick, elusive, fast wideouts, they can cause some real matchup problems in coverage. But then they're in a challenging situation when it comes to blocking. So when you got a guy like Juwan Johnson who's 6'4", anywhere between 225 and 230 pounds, depending on the day. That's essentially like lining a tight end up out there over a defensive back. So that helps. And then I think the other thing is we've emphasized it, and that was something that I felt strongly about going into this camp, that we needed to improve on both sides: block destruction on defense, defeating the block and being able to go make the tackle, and then on offense, being able to be physical, create space, and sustain the block. So What I asked to happen a little bit more this year and during camp was every time you say one-on-one O-line versus D-line or one-on-one DB versus receiver, everybody's think you're talking about routes and coverage. But we did a lot more this year of the receivers going against the defensive back and blocking and block destruction drills where you're not trying to simulate it yourself. With two wide receivers going against each other, it's just not the same when you can compete against other really good players in a blocking and block destruction drill. It's going to get guys more prepared for what they're actually going to face on Saturday. So we did more of that. I think we all know that our run game is going to start with our offensive line. To give Saquon a chance to get started. Our tight ends are extensions of our offensive line, from that standpoint. We all know Saquon and the rest of our running backs are talented to get to the next level, and now you got a combination of our receivers blocking downfield and Saquon having to be responsible for the one free hitter, that would account for the quarterback. That one player on defense where they kind of have an advantage. That's the running backs guy. The running backs, that's their job, is to consistently beat the one guy that's not accounted for. And a combination of all those things, when you do it, you got a chance to have a pretty successful running game.
We'll open up to questions here in the room. Raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you.
Hey James, how you doing today?
Great, how are you?
Doing well. You mentioned on Saturday that your young defensive ends need to take the next step to put fear in the quarterback, the offensive tackle, and the offensive coordinator. And you said it would come. What do you think they need to do to get to that point? And can you elaborate on that, and then how far away you think they are from that?
Well, I think, first of all is that was the position we probably had the least experience, returning. So they need to gain more experience. And the best way to gain experience is by playing. We were fortunate enough to play a bunch of guys, because some guys their game is going to elevate, on Saturdays, and some guys are going to, not look as good as they've looked in practice. So being able to kind of identify that and figure that out is important. And I think, to be honest with you, a big part of it is the style of offense you're playing. If you're playing a pro-style offense, it's going to run the ball, play action, drop back on third down, stand in the pocket, and go through progressions. Then you got to be able to make that guy uncomfortable. But when you're doing RPOs or quick game and the ball's coming out pretty quick, and the defense has to determine, is this a run or a pass on pretty much every single play, that makes it difficult to get to the quarterback, as you've seen with our offense as well. One of the big reasons we made the change that we did to help the offensive line. So I think a lot of it also just kind of determines and is dictated by the type of team you're playing, or also kind of how the game has changed. So my point is if you get up by 21 points on someone or 28 points on somebody, and now that team feels like they have to throw the ball to get back into it, then that's a situation where your defensive line, your defensive end should really be showing up in that type of game. So I don't know if necessarily Saturday was that type of game because they were a big RPO team. And then to be honest with you, I think towards the end of the game, I don't want this to come off the wrong way, but I think they weren't necessarily calling an offense to try to get back in the game, if that makes sense. So I think all those things kind of factor in, and we just got to continue gaining experience. I think, obviously Sean Spencer, I think, does a really good job. Me and Sean have been together for a long time. You don't coach a guy who leads the nation in sacks like Carl Nassib, and you don't coach a unit that leads the nation in sacks without feeling like you can develop those things. And as you guys know, I take a lot of pride in how we develop our guys. From the time they get on campus until they graduate. So I have a lot of confidence that will continue to improve.
Hey, James, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hey, dovetailing off of T. Frank's question here.
What does that mean? Where does that expression come from?
You know what? I don't really know. But it'll play with his question.
So I'm just curious where things come from. Like dovetail. Does anybody know that?
Carpentry.
Is it? Carpentry, what is the deal with carpentry?
It's a joint.
But how does that, so it's connecting two points.
Sorry.
Good, it's good, no, it's good.
I'm actually trying to post something here and I wasn't paying complete attention, but when you said that.
Love it.
Hey, when, having had the opportunity now to go back and look at film, with the game your defensive line, as an entire group played, what are your thoughts now, having had the chance to go back and look at it compared to what your thoughts were, post-game?
Chavis was a guy that really jumped out to me. He was physical, he was explosive. I showed the entire team, on Sunday. I pull out about 6 plays a game that I show. And, he had a couple plays where he just took the center and drove the center back 5 yards into the backfield. And I don't care what offense you're running. If the nose guard takes the center and drives them 5 yards back in the backfield, I don't care if you're running pro style, I don't care if you're running spread, I don't care if you're running option, I don't care what you're doing, you're going to have a hard time being successful. So he was a guy that really stood out to me as a group. I thought obviously they played well. I thought Buchholz obviously was disruptive. I thought really our tackles played really well. Our defensive tackles played well. I think our ends showed some nice things. But I'd say Chavis was the guy that kind of really stood out to us. We really just feel like we got 5 interior defensive tackles right now that are pretty darn good. And when you're able to have that, and those guys are able to rotate and stay fresh and not play a lot of reps, then that's going to help you in the fourth quarter. That's going to help you late in the season, those types of things. So, we're in a pretty good position there.
Happy week 2. James, curious.
You too.
Thanks. Aaron Monroe dressed, warmed up, but didn't play. Why was that? And do you expect him to be available this week?
Correct.
Will be available this week?
Correct.
Okay, my actual question then. Looking at your offensive line and kind of grading out some of those younger guys at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, what did you see there, and what does Zach Simpson bring for you guys, because he's doing a lot? Yeah,
I'm a huge fan of Zach Simpson. He's a guy that showed up here with very little fanfare. All he's done since the day he's got here is put his nose down and got to work academically, athletically. He's one of those guys that earned everybody's respect very early on with that approach. I'll never forget, Anthony Zettel, all the time talking about him saying that guy's going to play here. That guy's going to end up being a good player here. AJ, all those guys, they just, the way he battled. So he's got a bright future. We're very, very glad he's here. It's awesome when you're able to keep a local kid from the community home. His parents come to practice all the time, which is really cool. But we love him, and that's kind of what I talk about all the time. For us to have the success that we want to have, it takes so many people with so many different roles having an impact and embracing their roles. That's the letterman. You know, that is the fans. That is the students. You know, that is our band. You know, that is obviously, you know, our coaches. That's the managers. That's the trainers. That's the backup center. That's the fourth team long snapper that, you know, maybe again people don't know about. But for us to run the type of organization and program that we want to run, it takes every single one of those people to take a lot of pride in their job and in their role. And I make the argument that whether you're the fourth team long snapper or the starting quarterback, you should be walking around on campus after that win we had this past Saturday, feeling like you had a significant role in it. And I think Zach's one of those guys. He is not satisfied with his role, but he understands his role and takes a lot of pride in it, and comes to work every single day trying to get better, you know, for himself, and more importantly, trying to help the team be successful. So I love the guy. Huge fan.
James, Pitt.
How are you?
Good. I'm wet.
That's right up your alley. That brings me to last year. Instead of white, wet blanket, wet shirt.
Figuring out dovetail.
That's been figured out for us.
The Pitt is approaching this week a little differently, and they approached it the same way last year in terms of media access. I don't know if you knew that, but I was just curious. Did you feel that last year you guys were ready for what they were going to bring emotionally, or was it more of a matter of physical execution at the beginning of the game before you guys began the comeback?
Yeah, I think, you know, it was early in the season. We still hadn't kind of, you know, gotten our identity. It was a hostile environment, and I think they were a talented team. I mean, you look at their roster, you look at their team last year, very talented. You know, they were obviously able to get a win against the national championship team as well. And yet you look at how many guys they end up having get drafted or making NFL teams. They were a talented team and they played well. Got to give them all the credit in the world. You know, from a media perspective, I think you guys know, you know, once again, we're not going to change our approach week in and week out. I'm not going to talk about one game differently than another. I'm not going to exclude the media. Whoever comes to the press conference, you know, will get to interact with me and the players. Whoever comes to practice will get a chance to interact with you know, whoever we have assigned to interact with the media that day. I know you guys always want more access. I think we've probably provided more access than Penn State's ever provided. Although I don't know if that's always appreciated, to be honest with you. But it's going to be consistent. And I think that's what most people ask for in life, is they want consistency in behaviors. And that's what we're going to do. We're probably not always going to make every single one of you guys happy with all your requests and all your wants and all your needs. But you know what you're going to get with us week in and week out. Now that's how we choose to run our organization. He's got the ability to run his organization however he sees fit. Some programs, I've been a part of them, they have a one-voice policy all the time where you never hear from anybody but the head coach. I think that's how the Patriots do it. So one-voice deal. You never talk to the assistant. So everybody kind of has their ability to run their organization, their program, the way they see best. But just with us, it's not going to change week to week.
Dave?
Coach, is there any
Hi, Dave.
How are you today, Coach?
Good, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Is there any one of your guys you see as particularly critical to containing Henderson? And is there any challenge to keeping your guys from getting caught up in all the outside hype about this game?
Well, the first comment is I would say our kickers are you know, Tyler on kickoff, and then obviously, you know, Blake as our punter, and making sure that our punts and our kicks have the right distance, have the right hang time, and have the right location to allow our guys to get down and cover the ball. You know, to me, I think it's exciting, and I think our team will approach it the same way. It's a tremendous challenge. You know, he's All-American as a returner last year, so it's going to be a real challenge. He had a significant impact in the game last year, so so we're excited about it. But I think, you know, the biggest factors are going to be how we kick the ball, and then back to your point about all the outside noise and all the distraction. No, because once again, that's why we have the approach that we have. You know, our approach is consistent. Each week, the game we're playing is the most important game that we have. I guess what I don't understand is, are we supposed to prepare harder this week than we did last week? I mean, if we didn't play well, and I said, well, yeah, we didn't prepare as hard this week, you know, because we got this game next week, that's a big game. I don't get it. It never makes sense to me, and people get frustrated with it and all that kind of stuff. But you know, we're going to control the things that we can control, and the thing that we can control is today, not tomorrow, not yesterday. We can control today. So I want our players, I want our coaches to do everything they possibly can from the time the alarm goes off to the time they go to sleep, and be comfortable at night laying your head on the pillow because you know you did everything you possibly could to maximize that day. When it comes to school, when it comes to preparing for this opponent, and the more days we put together like that, the Saturdays will take care of themselves, the exams will take care of themselves, and that's how I want our guys to operate in this program, but that's also how I want our guys, I hope, to operate in life. You know, take the game of football and learn these tremendous life habits that are going to allow them to go on and be successful in their futures. So, yeah, I think you focus on the things that you can control. Outside noise is not one of them. Expectations are not one of them. Cheers or boos are not one of them. Focus on the things that we can control. So that's why we don't change our approach. That's why I don't provide access to the media one week and not the next, because our players know what to expect. Our media knows what to expect. Our fans know what to expect. I know what to expect. I wake up in the morning, I know exactly what I got for the day, and I think there's comfort in that, and I think there's confidence in that when you have a routine. My dad was in the Air Force, and one of the things and things that I've read when it comes to the military is you have a SOP, a standard operating procedure. That allows you to be organized, that allows you to not miss things because you follow your routine. There's also another military thing that says that you don't raise to the level of your competition, or you don't raise to the level of the challenge. You actually fall back to your training. And that's what I want our guys to do, is when times get tough, they don't need to think about what they do. They just fall back to their training. This is what we do. This is how we operate day in and day out. And it's not about the opponent. It's about our standard at Penn State. Our standard, not the opponent. So it's something I believe very, very strongly in, as you can probably tell.
Hey James, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. In 2006, 5 teams averaged 35 or more points a game. Last season, 26 teams averaged more than 35 points a game. How does that change what you expect out of a defense on a game-to-game basis, because the game has become so much more offensive-minded? You look, I know there's staff connections there, but for an example, last night Tennessee won, but they gave up over 500 yards on the ground. You couldn't have done that 10 years ago. I mean, how does what offense has turned into change what you expect out of a defense?
Yeah, I think it's just changed how you have to look at it. You know, the days of a certain yardage. I mean, before it's like if you had 400 yards of offense, that was like crazy. Where now, like, that number is probably 600. You know, so it is changed. There's no doubt about it, and because there's so much diversity, you can go from defending you know, the option one week to the next week defending a pro-style Stanford, Michigan State style offense where they're going to try to hammer you with, you know, 22 personnel, 2 tight ends, you know, offensive line, fullback, and try to hammer you. And then you go the next week where you may not see a tight end or a fullback for 4 weeks running the spread. I think that's what's so challenging and difficult about being a defensive player and a defensive coordinator now. But I would make the argument that's what makes it so exciting. That's what makes it so fun, is the diversity in the game right now. You know, there's a lot of different ways, to do it, a lot of different ways to be right. And I also think that's an argument of why I think the option is such a great college offense, because there's only a few teams running it, and that's what makes it so difficult to defend. Because now, well, one of the numbers that's really interesting is everybody talks about how difficult it is to defend the option, okay? If you do it during the week, I think the ideal situation is that you do it in game one. But then the problem is that you spend an inordinate amount of time working on defending an option. If you look at people the following week after defending one of those teams, it has an impact. So these are all the things when we talk about scheduling, when we talk about looking at an entire program and decision making and all these aspects, these are all the things you have to look at when you're studying best practices. But for a defense overall, it's just changed. You know, for people to look at our defense now and try to compare it to the defense here in the late 80s and early 90s, the numbers, you can't compare. It's apples and oranges. It's comparing two different universes. So I think that's the first thing. And then I think the other thing is you kind of have to look at it. We had a discussion yesterday. I went into the defensive room and was kind of talking about, we talked about 4-minute offense. And we had a lot of discussion this offseason about 4-minute offense and who we were going to be and what we were going to be and how we were going to do that. But I'd also make the argument that you need to look at that on defense as well. You need to play 4-minute defense, which I think I'm talking about a different style of 4-minute defense. 4-minute defense as it goes with a spread offense. Because my point is, to think that your offense, if you run a spread offense, that you're going to be able to just go out and run the ball in a 4-minute situation and eat crazy amount of time off the clock, that's not who you are. You can't change your identity in that situation. So now I would say some of that argument now is on defense. You can't give up a 75-yard drive in 4 plays. You got to make them earn it. So I would say 4-minute philosophy now is an entire team philosophy when you're playing a spread style offense, if that makes sense. So I just think you have to change how you look at it. I think is probably the biggest thing.
Time for 2 more.
James, how are you?
Good, how are you?
So going into this week, you're preparing for the quarterback. He's obviously only played 1 game in this offense, and I think it was 3 last year at USG before Sam Brown took over. So do you go back and look at last year's tape at all, even though it's a slightly different offense with different athletes around it, or you just base this off of 1 game?
Yeah, I think it's like when you look at a defense and now they have a new defensive coordinator. You're looking at those plays, not necessarily to see how they run that offense. You're looking at that guy to just see his movement, see his arm strength, see his command of the offense. You may even go back and watch high school tape. You're going to do whatever you possibly can to give yourself the best opportunity. You may go back and watch spring games, USC spring games. Whatever's going to give you the best opportunity to kind of understand who that guy is, especially at the quarterback position.
Hey, James, you made a great point about perceptions of the 80s versus now about offense. I think that explains where some Penn State fans are regarding Pitt in such a different era and things are so different.
Yeah, I think the game has changed in general. I think there's more parity. I think there's more parity in football. I can't speak specifically about what you said, but I think whenever you're trying to compare, I mean, you look even in the state. You look at Temple, you look at Pitt, you look at Penn State. You look across the country in all these different programs. There are programs that are having a bunch of success that hadn't had it before. People have kind of found the model that has worked for them. And then I also think some of the things that people are doing, running the spread offense, running wishbone, doing different things to say, okay, here's my situation. What am I going to do to give us the best chance to be successful? I think the fact that scholarships were limited. Years ago when there was no limits on scholarships and certain schools could sign as many as they wanted, not because they wanted the player, but just so other schools couldn't get them. The conference that we play in now, there's so many factors. When I go back and I kind of look at our history and I try to study best practice from a Penn State perspective, I typically am looking at the Big Ten era, not before that, because again, it's hard to compare. There's just so many differences. So, yeah, I do think, you know, there's an aspect to every fan base and every, you know, probably media group that covers historic programs like Penn State. They're comparing things to years ago, which is wonderful, and we have the ability to do that, but the game really has changed in so many different ways, and that's where I think our challenge, which with the small numbers of schools like us, is how do you continue to embrace the history and traditions with also moving forward to, you know, today's football. And I think that's one of the things that we've worked really hard at since getting here, of balancing that. And I think probably last year and this year, we're probably in the best position to do that because, number one, we understand our past and our history. And then we have I think a pretty good awareness of, you know, the era of football that we are in now, and also the era of Penn State University, and being able to kind of take all that information and then be able to create, you know, the best blueprint moving forward for how our organization needs to be run.
Hi, James. One last question. Right here in the back.
How you doing?
Good. You touched on it at the outset, but I'm interested in knowing, when you travel the state and you talk with your fans, what are they telling you about this particular game on Saturday?
Yeah, you could use Twitter and ask them. They're all over the place. I'm not going to speak for our fans. As you guys know, I kind of hear a lot in a lot of different places. I hear things on Twitter. I hear things when I take my girl Sunday morning for donuts. I think I told you guys the one year on the caravan, I was actually using the toilet and someone came and tapped me on the shoulder and had some advice and wanted me to sign a football. But you know, if you want to find out what our fans, I mean, that's where social media helps. You can ask them directly. I'm not going to try to speak for anybody else. I can tell you what the game means to us. If you want me to go through all that again.
Thank you, Coach.
Thanks, guys.